guys, I'm Nalini Tranquim. I am a Christian certified life coach, and I just want to say welcome to my Top Tips to Life series. Today's topic is a real personal one to me. When I was just 3 years old, my older brother at the time, he would have been 5, passed away very suddenly. It was my first ever encounter with grief. Now, what is grief? Well, I call it the process of coming to terms with and letting go in order to accept a new reality. Well, I have the privilege of speaking to my own mama on the topic today. Now, I may have lost a brother, but she lost a son. So what will you walk away with today? Well, of course, we are going to open up about our own stories, so be sure to grab the tissues. But more importantly, we want to equip you with tools to help you navigate personal grief, but also to help those of you who have loved ones that are battling with grief. Let's face it, grief is an extremely sensitive matter, and we're not necessarily given a manual on how to handle it. And we all face grief at some point, so why not be a little prepared? Okay, let's get into it.
See me now?
Yay! I can see you now.
Does that look all right?
It looks amazing. Hello.
Hello there.
I can't believe I'm interviewing my own mum. Okay, so today we've got a pretty full-on conversation, and I was thinking I really do need to make sure I've got tissues to hand.
You got my tissues to hand as well. Yeah.
That's so good. I knew you would. I've had this in my heart actually for a while to bring to the table the topic of grief, because it's something that we all at some point in time are going to have to face.
Exactly. Yes.
And I'm just like, surely we can equip people with, what works, what doesn't work,
exactly.
The emotional torment of grief is normal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay,
because it's not a subject that people just want to talk about.
No.
Not openly like we're doing today.
No, and of course, when you're hit with grief or you've got a loved one who's navigating grief, that's not the time to be asking the questions.
No.
So I thought if we could just create this safe place for people to just sit, listen to our story,
good plan.
and how we navigated it.
We'll give that a go. I'll try not to end up a blubbering mess.
I know. So in my description of this particular episode, I say quite bluntly, I lost my brother, but my mum lost her son.
Yeah.
So it's, your grief is completely different to my grief. So
it is. Yeah.
If I can just, use your tissues. I would like to just be able to hand over to you to just share a little bit about what happened. You don't have to go into, detail.
Sure.
Just paint a picture of what happened, and then I'll ask you a few questions. Is that okay?
Okay. All right. No, thanks, love. Thank you. It was the Christmas of the year that he turned 5. We noticed that he had difficulty picking up small items. We bought him a compendium of games that had tiddlywinks in it and Chinese checkers and things like that. But he was finding it difficult to pick these things up.
Yeah.
We were first-time parents, so we thought, it's just a phase he's going through. So we didn't really think anything of it. He started school in the January of the following year. We noticed that he started scuffing his feet a lot, and then he started falling over. So I talked about it to a nurse friend of ours, and she said, no, you definitely need to get him checked out with your GP. So I took him to the GP, and the GP, tested him. He did lots of fine motor coordination things with him. I don't know the details, but straight off, he said, I need to refer him to a pediatrician.
Yeah.
And as soon as he mentioned pediatrician, I knew that there was something serious going on here.
Yeah.
So we got to see the pediatrician, and she did a full-on, much bigger, in-depth test with him. And I was there during the whole time. And then straight off, she said, no, I need to refer him to a neurosurgeon.
Oh, Mom.
And that was just so hard. And I said to her, what do you think it is? And she refused to answer. And I said, I am not leaving this room until you tell me what you think the problem is.
Yeah.
And she said, I suspect he's got a brain tumor. Oh. I mean, how do you cope with that when you've got a 5-year-old? A child of 5 shouldn't have to have a brain tumor.
Yeah.
So that was really, really hard. So we took him to the neurosurgeon, and he did various tests and whatnot. And then he realized that there was a buildup of pressure in his brain. And look, even when he was born at the hospital in the UK, when he was born there, they carted him off and were measuring his skull and doing various things. And I asked them, you know, what's going on? And they said, no, we're just making sure that everything's working well. We do this with all babies.
Right.
And it was only then that the neurosurgeon, when I mentioned this to him, he said, they were possibly suspecting hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain.
Oh my gosh.
So he did some more tests and things, and then he realized that there was a buildup of pressure on the brain. So he did surgery to remove the pressure. Now, after he'd had surgery, he did start recovering. And so we thought, oh, praise God. And he said he was going to have to put a shunt in or something, I think, to relieve I don't know the technical details.
Yeah.
But we were okay with that because he was making good progress. But then slowly he started deteriorating, and he ended up back in hospital, and he started losing his speech, so he couldn't talk, and he just could not walk at all. And within 3.5 months of us noticing the first signs, he'd gone.
Mum, that's so sudden.
It was just so hard.
Devastating. I remember, for me, I had to stay with Auntie Bev and Uncle Kev,
Yes.
the children.
Yeah.
They were dear friends of the family.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they just made life as normal as possible for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind, I was 3, so it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't realize childhood memories could go back that far, but I guess it was such a huge event.
Yeah, it was.
You know, it kind of just sears itself in your mind. And I remember one time when little Ashok, my brother, came home from the hospital, and that must have been around the time where you guys were like, okay, there's an improvement here.
Yes.
And he was in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I just remember you and Dad just saying, you need to be very, very gentle with him, very careful with him. And I vividly remember pushing him in the wheelchair around the house. We had parquet flooring, and you know, pushing him around the house. And that is my last memory of being with him.
Yes.
And then I remember staying with Auntie Bev and Uncle Kev again, and the kids. And then Auntie Bev sitting me down on the day that that she would have heard the news.
Yes.
And I remember we had a conversation about it years later, and she said, she sat me down on her lap, and she just said, I've just got something to tell you. And, you know, I was only little, and she just said, your brother's gone to be with Jesus in heaven. And she said, I flinched, like I did this really weird jerk thing. And then she said, and then I just got up off her lap and ran off and, you know, carried on playing Jane and what have you. Talk to me about how the grief hit you.
I think I went into a grief bubble. I couldn't cope with what was happening with myself. And I didn't have any thoughts for you or your dad at that time, because I was just so caught up in my own grief. And it was a challenge, but I had to wake up to the fact that you needed to live a normal life. You needed to play with your friends. You needed to go to the birthday parties. And that was just so hard because, you know, our friends were also struggling because they had kids of the same age as you and the same age as little Ashok, and they didn't know quite how to cope with us.
Yeah.
So I had to just break out of this bubble and just be with dad and cry with dad so that we could share together. And because too many couples separate, they end up separating when there's a death, especially of a child.
And do you think it's because they're navigating their grief as individuals rather than as a unified couple?
Yes, exactly.
How do you let the other one in then? How do you do that?
I can't recall how we did it, but there was a
shift.
I realized that no, this wasn't just about me and my pain.
Yeah.
I had to see that you and dad were also struggling and our friends were struggling with this.
Yeah.
So I had to, but I can't recall how that happened.
Yeah, but I think just that realization in itself, it's interesting how I open up about my battles with anxiety and PTSD and, you know, a couple of times in the past where I was actually suicidal and how insular those emotions are. And it's very internal focused, as is grief then.
Yes. Yes. And what I found was, love, the grief would catch me totally unawares.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes even while I was in a supermarket going grocery shopping, when I could get my head around the fact that I needed to do normal stuff, the grief would just well up just like that for no apparent reason. And I'd end up having to leave the supermarket, leave the trolley there because I just was not coping with this grief. It almost comes up from your boots.
Yeah.
Oh, that is just so hard.
And yet it's a process that you have to go through.
Exactly. But you're thinking, what the heck is going on with me? Am I normal?
Yeah.
Is this normal or what? But people don't share with you the different stages that you need to go through, and yet not all the stages of grief happen in the same way with everybody.
No, exactly. Okay, so with you, it was these outbursts of emotion.
Yes.
Was there ever a time where you were angry or you blamed yourself? Or
of course we blamed ourselves. Dad and I were like, what did we do that caused this?
Yeah.
I mean, the neurosurgeon obviously had to have a post-mortem because they were asking questions, you know, how do you and your husband get on and stuff. They didn't know if there was family violence going on here. They didn't know that. So they had to do a post-mortem, and that was when he saw that there were shadows on the back of his brain. And then he said, no, he died of encephalopathy, which it kind of brought relief to us because we had always wondered, was there something we could have done to have prevented this?
And you couldn't have.
Which is what all parents cry, you know, when their child dies.
Yeah, of course. And I think even going down that route, though, in your mind of, could we have done things different?
Yes.
It's so important to break out of that, hey, and to stop feeding that, because that's only going to send you in a downward spiral.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
The same way you have to go, look, I've got another child, I've got a husband, I've just got to somehow push through this grief.
Exactly. Yes.
Finding something that's going to give you that purpose.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's unfair on those who are living. I remember,
of course it is,
a conversation with a beautiful mum, a darling friend of ours who lost one of their children to suicide, and the grief just overcame them, and it was like a year, 2 years. And I remember once having this conversation with her and just saying, but what about the children who were living?
Exactly.
Yeah, it just did a flip around
shift
for her.
That's it. You have a paradigm shift.
Yes. So it's having something that gives you that purpose to wake up in the morning.
Yes. Our Christian faith really saw us through this, and our friends were amazing. Look, some of them just didn't know how to cope with it, to be honest. They just did not cope. They didn't know how to cope with it.
Yeah.
They'd come out with stupid things like, oh, well, you can always have another one.
Oh, Mom.
or they'd say, oh, we know what you're going through. No, hang on a minute. You've got no idea what we're going through. You've got no idea.
I think it's because people are nervous about it, right? Okay, so what do you say? What is deemed as appropriate in that moment?
Sometimes, look, it's not actually saying anything. It's just coming and giving us a hug.
Yeah.
So I just want to let you know we love you. We're there for you. If there's anything we can do to help, please, we're here.
Yeah.
We're here. I mean, some of them, honestly, it was so hard because they didn't know what to do or how to cope with us. When we'd be in the supermarket, if they saw us in a supermarket aisle, they'd dodge into the next aisle because they just did not know what to do. I mean, you don't get trained on this, do you?
No, you don't. No, you don't. Okay, so you've got a loved one who has lost a partner or child, or you're in this very exact scenario. You haven't seen them since the loss.
Yes,
The only forms of communication you've had is on Facebook or whatever, where everyone puts condolences. And now it's your first time seeing the person since their loss.
Yes.
What do you say? What do you do?
Yes. Look, approaching them and just telling them, you know, you love them or you care for them. You know, can I give you a hug? Because some people just, they don't want to actually see anybody. Really, when you're in that grief bubble, you just don't want to see anybody. You don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, you know, asking them, can I give you a hug? Would that be all right?
Yeah.
And quite often, they'll just,
the tears just come.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. So my grief is very different, of course.
Of course.
I remember this overwhelming sense of loneliness.
Yes.
This time in my life. And I think it's because I was born into having him there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
So I experienced loneliness for the first time at 3 years of age. And I remember, even at that age, being heartbroken for you and Dad.
Yeah.
Even as a 3-year-old, I understood that the grief and the pain for you and Dad was 1,000,000 times worse.
Yeah.
And so I think I used to consciously try and stay out of your way, just to give you space. And so what I would do was, you would get me from nursery or whatever. This was before piano came on the scene, because piano only came on the scene about a year later.
Yes.
And that was a lifeline for me. But within that first year or however long it was, I remember going into my room after nursery school, and I had this massive big, like, Chronicles of Narnia wardrobe.
Oh yes.
And I would go and sit inside
in it.
Yeah, I would close the door and I would sit
inside the
wardrobe.
Yeah.
And I would actually talk to God, to Jesus, and I would, be like, so how was your day? And what has he been doing today? Because, I remember vividly saying that he had gone to heaven to be with Jesus.
Yes.
And so I would sit in my cupboard and I would imagine what they were up to, like what games they had been playing that day.
Yeah.
And that for me almost became my relief and my way of handling my own grief.
Yes.
But this is something I've never said to you, and I want to say it to you now. Is I just want to thank you for giving me that space to grieve. You didn't once come into my room and go, what are you doing in your wardrobe? That's really weird. Can you please come out now and be a normal human being? You didn't once. You didn't once do that. You just you gave me that space.
That's it. That's it.
I think it's so important for parents who lose a child who still have living children.
Yes.
To understand that they are also grieving.
Yes. They think they're too young to understand.
I was not too young to understand what happened. I lost my friend, and
yeah, that's it.
The grief for me was very, very real.
Yeah.
But you gave me the space to adapt and to grow in my own way.
Yes.
And I love you guys for that. I'm so thankful for that.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for sharing that, love.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. I knew this was going to be hard, but...
So did I. Also, one of the hard things was, taking you to birthday parties.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the party, trying to find you to say, come on, we're going home now. But then also going out into the garden and calling for little Asher.
Oh, Mom.
And saying it's time to go home now.
Oh, Mom.
But I mean, women that have lost their husbands, or husbands that have lost their wives after they've been married for goodness knows how long, they're still setting the table for them to come for dinner.
Yeah.
Because, it's just something that you've regularly done.
Yeah.
So how do you just turn that off?
You don't.
No,
you can't.
No.
You can't. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I know people who have kind of gone, that's just so embarrassing that I still lay the table for him.
Exactly.
And yet it's normal. It
is normal. Yes.
Part of human adaptation.
But it just catches you unawares. It just catches you unawares again. Yeah. I mean, even a few years ago, look, he's been gone, 38 years now. And a couple of years ago, when it was his birthday, I was just a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
Absolute blubbering mess.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, well, time will heal. Yes, it does. So the intensity of the grief isn't there.
Yes.
When you've lost a significant loved one, you don't know what's going to trigger it off again. You just don't know.
That's exactly right. It's almost, I wrote a poem for a friend of mine who lost a child. I think I titled it The Unwanted Guest. Yeah, and it's like, it's almost like grief in a way moves in. It's not something that once you've experienced, you can go back to how things were. It's like grief moves in, but over time, you adapt and you become that much more, okay with it being there in a way. I know it sounds really weird, but I want to say this as a way to just encourage people who are navigating grief. Is that even though it's painful, and even to this day, we still remember my brother on his birthday, and there's still moments, like I remember when I released the Your Love video and that premiered on YouTube. I was just like, I just wish he was here, just to be a part of that. So it never leaves, but
it doesn't. The intensity,
that's right,
is not there all the time.
Right.
But it can still catch you unawares when you're least expecting it.
Yes, 100%. Okay, but here's the question.
Yeah.
When you're in that place of intense grief and you feel like your heart is broken into a million pieces and you think you are never going to be normal
to get through this again.
Can you talk to that person? This isn't about coming up with the answers of what's going to work for them. I want an injection of encouragement that they are going to heal. That if they can just allow themselves to go through the grief process, which is perfectly normal, you will heal. Your heart is a resilient heart. The human heart is a resilient heart. So whatever your grief is right now, there is a resilience within the human heart that I'm telling you now, even though it feels like right now you're not going to get through.
Yes.
You're going to heal.
Yes. Look, I mean, just looking at the Aussies that have lost everything with the fires that devastated this place earlier this year and last year. I mean, the resilience of the human
heart
being is incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
I've got a few questions I wanted to ask you. What's the worst thing I can actually do when I have a loved one battling grief? And I think you actually answered this earlier, and it was to just ignore them or walk away or try and avoid. Is there anything else that is like this is not an appropriate time to do this when someone's navigating grief?
Look, because people don't know how to respond, some of them make light of it and they try and just make some kind of humorous comment.
Right.
Which is totally inappropriate.
Yes.
Totally inappropriate.
Okay, it's interesting that you say that, because we did have a question come in saying, should one ever put positive spins on grief? And if so, when would be the right time? No.
There's really no right time. Look, the thing is, if you've never experienced grief, I'm sure before we experienced the death of little Ashok, we used to have jokes about death and dying and all the rest of it. But when you've experienced grief, oh, no. You just, no.
I agree. Okay, I've got one lady's messaged in. She asks, what are some not so obvious signs that someone may be dealing with grief?
Mostly it's they tend to isolate themselves.
Pull themselves
They
away.
just pull back and just isolate themselves, because like I said earlier, when you're in your grief bubble, the last thing you want to do is see people. Partly because they don't know how to cope with you, and partly you're just so caught up in your own grief you can't see anything beyond that.
So that's why it's so important to find that one thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning, whether it's your husband or your partner or child,
young other children. That's it. That's exactly it. Or even your work, because if you're doing essential work, you've got a reason to get out there, but it's hard stepping out and interacting with people. It's a very hard thing to do in the early stages.
Absolutely. I have got one more question. How does one deal with unresolved grief over the loss of someone still living? Now, this is quite a powerful question. So, a breakup or a divorce where
that's it.
That grief process as if the person's died, but the person is actually very much
still alive. Exactly. That is just so hard. Because in one sense you're wishing that they'd actually died rather than they're still alive, and especially if they've got another partner coming along with them.
Right. How do you navigate that grief? I mean, I honestly, with what we went through last year, just with our own grief that we were experiencing as a family, one of the best things I did was actually go and see a psychologist. And
definitely. Yes.
Just having that space to be able to talk about what was going on in here.
Yes.
It was a lifeline for me.
Absolutely.
So it's okay to ask for help. I think that's definitely the one thing I want to bring.
Definitely. It's okay to ask for help, but it's also knowing who to ask the help from. I mean, they might be very well-meaning friends and family members, but they can still be very insensitive to what you're going through.
Absolutely.
So if you need to go and see a psychologist, go and see a psychologist. If you need to go and see your pastor, go and see your pastor.
Absolutely. I will add that it took me 2 or 3 psychologists before I felt like I found the right one.
The right one.
And
exactly.
It's got to work for you. It's got to feel like a safe place for you. But I love that you also said,
absolutely,
if you're a person of faith, have that conversation with your pastor. That's why your pastor is there.
Exactly. Like you were saying, it took you 2 or 3 goes with a psychologist to find the one that you connected with. So even with like a care team at your faith fellowship, whatever that is, you may speak to one person and they just don't get where you're coming from. So then you need to see somebody else. And but press in until you see the right person that you can open with. Yes.
Okay. And I guess also it's very similar then with someone who's actually lost a loved one is finding purpose in what's in front of you now.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Yes,
it's
that's
unexpected, but
yes.
I've got purpose and a future in front of me. It might not look like what I had expected.
Yes.
Because otherwise we write ourselves off from our future, and even our children, if we have children in the picture.
Yes, yes. When we get so caught up in our grief bubble, it's very difficult to get out of that unless we know what our life purpose is.
100%.
Because if my life purpose is only, growing up to get a job, to earn some money, to earn a pension, and, get married, maybe have kids, travel, do whatever. If my life purpose is limited to that, then we're going to struggle to move beyond the grief that we're experiencing. We need to know what am I here on earth for?
Exactly.
Because these things are, yes, they're important, but our lives are much bigger than that.
Okay, you have so hit the nail on the head. And I think particularly for people who are currently going through the grief of having lost a loved one, not necessarily to death, but the divorce.
Oh, yes,
It's so easy for our identity to become so enmeshed in the person that we're married to.
Yes.
But then when he leaves or she leaves and that relationship ends,
exactly,
we lose who we are.
Exactly. I mean, you might lose your house, or you might lose your job, your really important big job, and you lose that. Then unless you know who you are beyond that, you're going to struggle to move through the grief.
Mum, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I know this has been a really hard conversation, but thank you so much for bringing your wisdom to the table. My heart is so full. I know this is going to speak volume into people's lives. Seriously, I can feel it. I've already got people in my mind that I'm thinking they need to watch this.
Yes.
So I'm so thrilled. Thank you. I might just have to get you back. Guys, thank you so much for joining my mum and I today. I hope it wasn't too intense, but has actually added value into your world. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and do turn on notifications, okay? Because I have got so much more content coming your way that I would hate for you to miss. If today's episode has helped you and you're struggling with grief, then why don't you lock in a 30-minute free discovery session with me and let's talk. You don't have to face this alone. I'll make sure that the link is in the description field. I love you, and I'll talk to you soon.